welcome to the Building and Growing podcast, Matt. We're delighted to have you here today.
Thanks, man. Great to be here.
Excellent. So, Matt, you're the founder of Quiver. Do you mind telling us a bit about yourself, your journey, and then coming on to Quiver at the end?
Yeah, so it's been a strange one. Came out of university and worked out in China in finance for a period of time. Decided that after working there for about 6-7 months, finally made a little bit of money after university, and hadn't really done the sort of Southeast Asian traveling thing, that I'd spend sort of 2 or 3 weeks somewhere a bit warmer after sort of a pretty smoggy and cold Chinese winter in Shanghai. And ended up sort of having an idea for a company out there, which turned into something called Solu, which we built into sort of a team of 21 in the Philippines, in Manila.
Wow.
And was sort of able to sell, luckily, sort of 13-14 months later. And that sort of was my first really understanding of what sort of startups or business building might be, and I found it to be much more exciting and interesting than my previous sort of role.
Yeah.
It's a very lowly member of sort of an asset management firm, and then since then sort of came back to Europe and worked for a couple of sort of startup scale ups, Voim and Bolt in the mobility space, before sort of leaving Bolt beginning of 2021 to set up Quiver with my co-founder, a guy called Lewis.
Okay.
And what we do at Quiver, we sort of integrate into the checkout page of different retailers at their e-commerce page and on their e-commerce site, and provide sort of faster and emissionless and hopefully better, more customer-centric delivery options for customers to select from, and bringing the sort of the delivery experience that Amazon's able to provide, but across to a range of different brands and merchants that want to continue to sort of own the customer relationship. And that's what we've been building for the last sort of 12-18 months or so.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And so, I didn't know about Solu before, which sounds fascinating. But I guess in terms of the end-to-end customer experience in China, they've got a lot of super apps, and so I imagine you might have been inspired by those. Did that also inspire Solu?
It's really interesting the time out there. I mean, as some people might know, I mean, the customer experience that a customer sort of expects and wants out of like a consumer product is very, very different, and that's definitely true in China, and then in the Philippines too, where we set up Solu, was pretty different too. I think there were some interesting things to learn from China, especially at the time when I was there, sort of, 2017, 2018.
Yes.
It was my sort of first foray, I guess, into sort of what they were building with sort of Alipay, QR codes, and sort of mobile money in that sense. And so it was super interesting to see that a whole sort of paradigm of credit cards or debit cards has sort of been skipped.
Yes.
And they were sort of a good sort of 10 years or so ahead of where I'd experienced us being sort of in the UK and definitely in the US. And so that was super interesting. And as we were sort of building out the payment flow for what we built at Solu, I mean, we decided that is the sort of flow that we would use. And so definitely somewhat inspirational from that. I think also just getting a bit more exposure to sort of the sort of work ethic and sort of the entrepreneurial stories that have sort of taken place in China over the last sort of 10 or 15 years. And I wouldn't sort of acclaim myself to be any sort of expert on that at all, but sort of understanding and speaking to people and getting a bit of an insight as to what that's all like. It's pretty inspirational and pretty interesting, and something that we've tried to take aspects of forwards into company building at Solu, and then also now at Quiver.
Excellent. They certainly launch fast and can distribute very quickly because of the mobile-first approach.
Right.
And I'm sure we could talk about emerging markets all day. It's one of my favorite sort of topics. But going back to Quiver, I suppose, in that journey, you've got the customers, you've got the retailers, and, you've got the sort of delivery driver that's connecting the two of them. Do you want to talk a bit about the sort of problems that you're solving, by, let's say, persona, by customer or by retailer?
Yeah, so I think for starting on the retailer side of things, it's it's sort of the lost part of the customer journey that they have no control over or insight into or any transparency. They can't see what's happening. And so they might control the customer journey from sort of customer origination or acquisition, from ads or from the output they provide on social media, through friends and referrals, lots of different strategies that they might employ and use. But they very much then control that journey from a customer seeing that or seeing that over time. And also in their stores too is obviously something that they very much control. They then control that experience within the store or on site as a customer is going through and understanding what products are available and potentially putting things in a basket and checking out. They're then going to control that sort of payment flow, but then they don't control the bit of the delivery or the items getting to the customer. They have no insight really as to how that's gone. And we sort of came to this as a problem that we thought sort of could be improved. And as you sort of said, one of the things that you said there is around connection. And that's really what we've sort of sought to be at Quiver, to sort of be a trusted physical connection between brands and their customers. And we've seen that in some of the retention numbers that we've had from sort of customers using some of our options at checkout. The retention rate's sort of been over 85% in terms of when they come back to the website again, or even on a different brand or retailer that we might be working with, when they see our delivery options, they've used us before, sort of over 85% likely to select us again, which is a positive sign at this early stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a lot of really good studies out there when it comes to, let's measure mobile engagement or friction in terms of clicks. But like you said, nobody really looks at, the friction post-purchase.
Right.
I think if somebody were to say to me, how do you make sure that your delivery gets to you in good time, I would say Amazon Prime. That's really the only thing that comes to mind.
Right.
Whereas you're making this accessible to many different retailers. Do you want to talk about the types of retailers that predominantly Quiver works with?
Yeah, so right now we're working with about 140 across London. And there's a bit of a range there. Some quite small independent brands who are a little bit newer, as well as some more established brands that have been around for a while. And from cosmetics to consumer electronics, Maplin being an example there of a brand whose market share was very much sort of eaten by Amazon to an extent, who's could be able to provide sort of consumer electronics at the same price, maybe cheaper, but with that guaranteed next day delivery if you're a sort of an Amazon Prime member. And Maplin a few years ago, before they went bankrupt, was sort of an example of a retailer who had sort of a lot of stores across London and probably within a kilometre of most people's houses or works with work offices within London, but had a 3 to 4 day delivery window, and so sort of had their market share sort of munched into by Amazon, and really that's sort of part of what we're hoping to sort of help brands to achieve, is provide sort of a similar, if not better. We think it's better, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of maintain it to be a little bit better than what Amazon are able to provide. But in terms of the delivery speed and the delivery experience, and sort of providing a fairly magical sort of experience for customers in terms of the transparency, their ability to change locations, to add additional details, to be able to sort of share tracking information if it's a gift, and to hide potentially or mask some of those items for the sort of end customer who's actually going to be receiving it. So there's a lot there that we felt sort of was low-hanging fruit that we could sort of improve. And so Maplin's an example there, as I said, of a brand whose market share was sort of munched into, and now sort of as a brand we're trying to help them to sort of reclaim some ground with sort of a differentiated delivery experience that they're able to offer to their customers.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, why don't we dive into that? Let's say the delivery options that you provide retailers with that they can then pass over or offer to their customers.
So we have 4 sort of primary delivery options. One is immediate delivery. We sort of guarantee delivery within 60 minutes, so within the hour. We have same-day delivery, which if a customer sort of selects it before 7 p.m, we'll get it to them before 8 p.m. that day. And the next day delivery option, which is sort of available 24/7, We then also have a delivery window where a customer can select a window between 15 minutes and 4 hours in length from any time between 7 a.m. to midnight from now to sort of 3 or 4 weeks into the future. So they're the 4 sort of primary delivery options that we enable brands to sort of offer to their customers. And we've just launched returns and exchanges too, to sort of be able to do some of the reverse logistics there, and similar sort of thing in customers being able to sort of select a collection window, so they we'll come and collect it from them. There's no friction with them having to box it up, package it into a parcel locker or to a sort of a post office. And instead we'll collect it sort of when they want us to, and potentially also bring, if it's the wrong size or they want an alternative item, we can bring the alternative items to them in the same sort of movement.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, it's been interesting to sort of see customer preferences evolve already sort of over the last year as to sort of different times of year, different times of day, different days of the week as to what they typically like to select, whether it is that immediate or a same day, next day.
Yeah, and there's a lot of benefit there for both the retailer and the customer. I know that retailers lose inventory for specific periods of time due to returns. There are costs associated with returns. The fact that they're able to offer multiple different options of delivery to the clients makes them a more attractive retailer, but the convenience aspect for the customer in terms of choosing which delivery option they want is fantastic. So how do you price it? Who pays? Is it the retailer or is it the customer?
It's an interesting question, and on that, I mean, it's one of the things that we've seen is their sort of conversion rate when our options are available at checkout sort of increases between a range of sort of 12 to 25%, depending on the merchant we're working with, which is pretty sizable increase in sort of in orders and revenue for the merchants that we work with. And that's something that we sort of had a bit of a thesis on before, but weren't necessarily sure what was going to happen there. So it's been interesting to sort of have that proven out over the last 12, 14 months or so. But pricing, how do we charge for it? An immediate delivery is typically $4.99 or £5. Same with a delivery window. Same day being $3.99 or £4, and the next day sort of being $2.99 or £3 to the customer. That's the typical charge that they'll see at checkout.
Yes.
And then we'll take a small percentage, typically, of the order value from the retailer. Sort of have a blended revenue model between the two to ensure that it's not too costly for merchants and retailers, but also at the same time somewhat affordable for customers. So that's the balance that we've struck so far.
Okay, fantastic. So customers pay between £2.99 for, let's say, a slower delivery
next day
up to £4.99 for a within the hour.
Within the hour, or that sort of 15-minute delivery window.
Yes, excellent. 15 minutes is almost competing with Getir and Gorillas there. In terms of speedy delivery. Could you just dive a little bit more into the charge that the merchant or the retailer would take on? Is that a percentage of the order value?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. We try to sort of align our incentives with them in a way that makes this work. What we don't want this to be is sort of a product or a service that is only available for sort of luxury goods or for sort of an order value over £100 or £150. Instead, we sort of share the risk with them and try to align our incentives in that if they have an order at the value of £20, then they're making less money, and so are we. If they have an order value of £200, then they're making more money, and as such, so are we. And so really trying to align our incentives with the pricing, and we don't charge any sort of monthly minimum or SaaS fee. There's no sort of integration or onboarding costs. We really try to as I say, align our incentives in the way that if their customers select our delivery options, then we make money. If not, then we don't. That's been pretty powerful for sort of onboarding, as I said, sort of a range of different merchants so far.
Yeah, excellent. And then I suppose, this is really the commercial side of things, but operationally, you've got to be able to deliver on the promise. So what's your strategy when it comes to hiring couriers and ensuring that you've got the supply to deliver within the time-framed options?
Yeah, it's a good fun challenge, and something that we're sort of continuing to get better at. But to me, that's the sort of the funnest aspects of my role at the moment, is that sort of looking at it as a sort of constraint optimization function, and trying to understand what do we need and when do we need it, and trying to sort of optimize that for efficiency over time is really interesting, and something that we've got a lot better at in terms of product and tech. Really for us. So first of all, sorry, on the couriers, they're all full or part-time employees,
Okay.
uniformed, hopefully well trained, and yeah, I think as there's lots that we can do around sort of the product and the interaction that a customer gets from us, around tracking, around notifications and emails, around if things are delayed or things do go wrong, sort of letting them know,
Yes.
and being very communicative there. But there's also, I think, a lot of value that one can add sort of in the courier experience, and sort of having as I said before, sort of magical experience at the door, one that doesn't involve sort of deliveries being left in rubbish bins or sort of thrown over a fence. And so again, one of the things that we have for customers is they're able to sort of select preferences as to, if not in, then what. If that is sort of leave with a concierge, or deliver to a neighbour, or not to deliver with a certain neighbour that maybe they're not on the friendliest terms within. So sort of enabling customers to sort of build out a profile of what they want, that regardless of the brand that they sort of select our delivery options with, they're able to their sort of preferences and are sort of carried across, which has been an interesting thing to see. So yeah, I mean, from an ops perspective, as I said, it's been an interesting challenge, but yeah, we're very focused on how can we ensure that sort of delivery experience is as good as it can be.
Fantastic. And it really reminds me of the Four Seasons hotels. I worked there when I was at uni, and a customer would be able to have the exact same pillow preference, regardless of whichever hotel they stayed at across the globe. So that's really, really good to hear you guys are doing the same, or really focusing on nailing the customer preferences.
No, that's it. And I think the way that we've sort of set ourselves up commercially is that if customers don't select our delivery options, if they don't come back to us, then we're not making money. So it's a forcing function to keep ourselves accountable, to ensure that we're always sort of focused as much as we can on the customer there. And I think what you said there about the Four Seasons, but also the sort of famous Airbnb maxim of how do we make this sort of a 5-star experience? Okay, what would a 6-star experience then look like? And sort of layering that on as sort of a thought process that we're now starting to unlock, sort of, I guess, different levels as to what we can do as we sort of grow and mature a little bit as a company. Is an interesting thing that we sort of continue to discuss on a weekly basis in our sort of ops catch-up meetings.
It's fantastic. And yeah, the key thing to delivering that extra added value is to have those conversations. Sometimes, they're hard, but they unlock all the value for the customer. Yeah.
It's and it's a fun market to be in. I think when we look at sort of alternative delivery options that are out there, a lot of the time they are sort of at the perhaps lower sort of bound of what one might consider to be sort of acceptable. And so there's a lot of room for us to innovate, to try different things, to sort of really try to build out an experience there that the customers really value, and then hopefully associate with us as a brand too.
Yes, fantastic. So my next question is going sort of back to the pandemic. We saw a huge explosion of instant delivery companies in the grocery space. And so, you're really offering, instant or fast delivery across a number of different industries. So it's kind of a surprise question of what industry surprised you the most that you gained traction in, that you would have thought, actually, no, I didn't think this industry would want 1 hour delivery, but they do.
That's a good question. Our first client was a tailor in Savile Row.
Wow.
So sort of very high end, not particularly fast moving, but a network of very trusted clients who that she worked with, and wanted to drastically sort of improve the delivery options that were available. And yeah, it's that was our sort of our starting point, which was unexpected, not necessarily what we were going for, but sort of came into our lap. June 23rd of 2021 was the first time we did a sort of a transaction,
Wow.
and so that was with them. So that, I mean, it's been a sort of a surprise from the start, and I think from then we definitely started with sort of assumptions as to
Yes.
what we thought sort of specific verticals or types of brand and retailer and their sort of customer demographics might be suited to this, but none of them have really held up very well, which might say something about our sort of ability to sort of guess the future. But it's been really interesting to see pharmaceuticals and pharmacy have been a really sort of a big driver for us, especially to begin with.
Yes.
And that's been great to see. But also sort of on the on cosmetics and skincare. There's been something about that demographic, about sort of wanting it now, that we've been able to sort of provide and work with a range of different brands there that's been great. And apparel and retail too, from all sorts of different types of clothing, from sort of luxury footwear to perhaps less sort of expensive retailers who are providing a service to their customers. We've sort of been able to work across the board there and see sort of similar take-up numbers. So it hasn't really depended on the average order value. It hasn't really depended on the type of customer, the demographics. We've seen sort of very, very similar take-up from a real range of different industries there, which is not what we sort of initially expected at all.
Yeah, fantastic. So an absolute array of industries, from luxury to pharmaceuticals, cosmetics.
Yeah.
That's nuts. And very promising in terms of the traction side of things, particularly if you're getting that 85% retention across those industries. So with these retailers, are you offering any other services as well beyond, let's say, the delivery, the refunds, such as, say, inventory?
Yeah, so for a lot of brands and retailers that perhaps don't have stores or a physical footprint within the sort of city that we operate in, which is currently just London, we have a couple of sort of micro fulfillment centres.
Yes.
About 3,000 square foot a piece that currently store about 20,000 items between them on behalf of different brands and retailers. And so, yeah, we enable them to be able to sort of offer a similar sort of value proposition to brands and retailers who do have a physical footprint. And so, yeah, we're sort of storing items on their behalf and enabling them to provide sort of faster deliveries and also faster exchanges and returning back to our fulfillment centre to then batch those returns back to their sort of primary fulfillment centre. So that's been an interesting thing to sort of build out operationally, but also from a tech perspective as well. We sort of took the approach that anything that was, well, most of the things that we found off the shelf weren't really a great fit, and that it would be sort of a compromise that may enable us to sort of get started a little bit faster, but a little bit down the line we'd be sort of compromising on what we would be able to do from a functionality perspective, being sort of a client of another technology product. So that's something that has taken a bit of a while to build out, but is great and plugs straight into Shopify, Magento, WooCommerce, or whatever sort of e-commerce platform there is, but also into other inventory management systems and sort of warehouse management systems that other third-party logistics companies use. And one of the things that is a little bit wonky perhaps, but one of the things that especially operations and logistics professionals that we speak to are concerned about is having multiple locations or multiple fulfillment locations and sort of adding another one or two on.
Yes.
If they're working with us is sort of to them an additional headache, and is what they would typically have if they're working with sort of, I guess, standard 3PRs and setting one up in perhaps Northampton and another one in Amsterdam in the Netherlands and then another one in the US. It adds complexity across the board. And one of the things I think hopefully from building out this sort of product ourselves and having it to be flush and integrated with the other systems that they use is as that's proven not to be the case in terms of providing them with additional headache, the ability for them to sort of provide stock transfers and automate that process to us, for us to be able to tell them what to send us at given times, and to really take away any sort of friction that they might have expected there, has been a bit of a journey, but it's something that we're really proud of now, and is something that I think for us is going to be sort of a differentiating factor for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's fascinating, all of the movements of different stock and inventory, and the term escapes me, but sort of last minute or next best action or just in time. I think is it just in time sort of supply chain processes. They're fascinating, and I don't think they're spoken about enough in terms of, you know, the complexity.
Yeah.
So if you're able to, you know, reduce the friction and complexity for those merchants, then yeah, that will definitely lead to a lot of traction.
Yeah, it's been super interesting to see, and it's also exposed us to additional problems that the brands and retailers have. And I think one of the interesting things that we've found over the last sort of 14, 16 months of operating has really been that sometimes the sales cycle to work with a brand or retailer can be a little long.
Yes.
And lots of different stakeholders to sort of to go through and to have conversations with. But once you are working with them, they have very much treated us anyway as sort of a trusted technology vendor.
Yes.
And so they come to us with a range of different problems that they're experiencing and things that are on their roadmap, things that they're thinking about, which is has brought to us a very long list of potential things that we could build and help them to sort of solve and to sort of further add value to the brands and retailers that we're working with. And so one sort of I guess example of this that we've come across sort of fairly repeatedly is, and hopefully we'll be launching this beginning of next year. We've got it in test at the moment, but there's a lot more that we need to do to it. So hopefully we'll be able to launch it properly beginning of next year. Has been, if you buy something online and then go to return it in store, most of the times the retail staff in store have absolutely no idea about you as sort of your customer profile, how many times you've ordered in the past, what's your return rate been, is there sort of a certain segment of products that you've purchased in the past, are there certain products, for example footwear or sort of t-shirts or hoodies that you've continued to have got sized wrong in the past. All of that information is stored somewhere online, but it's then not brought to the retail staff's attention sort of when you come back into that store to return those items. And so that's a sort of a very low-hanging fruit that sort of by the nature of the way that we integrate with the retailers we work with is something that we've sort of hopefully, as I say, we'll be able to provide beginning of next year. And we've started to see it in a couple of stores at the moment, sort of testing it out to see what information is valuable, what isn't. So that's an example of sort of an additional sort of, I guess, low-hanging fruit that is very related to what I said before about sort of being the trusted physical connection between brands and retailers. But there are alternative sort of, I guess, avenues and angles that we can sort of provide better products and solutions for that aren't just related to deliveries or returns. And so it's been interesting to sort of explore, as I say, the long list of different things that the brands and retailers have brought to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And really positioning as a sort of, you know, a partner for those brands when it comes to data and technology and service overall. So looking forward to hearing more about the other verticals that could launch, or verticals and services. And a couple of moments ago you mentioned that currently London is the only city in which Quiver is present. Do you have any international expansion plans?
We do, and depending on when this is released, but we might already be there. But we'll hopefully be launching in Paris by sort of end of October, and we've got a sort of a lineup of merchants to launch there with, which is exciting. And really, from an international expansion or just from an expansion point of view, we went around and spoke to our merchants that we're working with and those that we haven't quite yet onboarded, and sort of asked them where sort of most makes sense for us to sort of be able to sort of add this service next. And Paris was sort of a resounding first choice for them. So over the last couple of months it's been really exciting time sort of setting things up and hopefully getting things in motion, and fingers crossed we're able to get everything sort of set up, as I say, sort of mid-October, end of October. It might be a little bit delayed, but we'll see. We're doing our best.
Yeah, fantastic. That's excellent, and not too far away for you here in London. You know, just jumping on the train.
Right. Yeah, it's helpful.
So that'll be it. That'll be very, very exciting, because I guess every market sometimes has their own unique characteristics, and so it'll be interesting to see whether you need to tailor any part of the service or the product for, let's say, the French market versus any other countries you choose to enter into later on.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting from an operations perspective. We built as I said, sort of we've drastically sort of improved the way that sort of batching takes place and auto dispatch is sort of happening, and we now sort of have a dynamic task prioritization algorithm that sort of runs to sort of try to make things as efficient as possible. That perhaps we could come up with a slightly sexier name. It doesn't sound that exciting, does it? But it's going to be really interesting to see how that transfers across to another city, where operationally it's very different. The sort of density profile of both where merchants are based, if we're sort of collecting from store, but also where our sort of fulfillment centers are going to be, but also where customers are based, is going to be completely different. And so it's going to be something that I guess we as humans, but also the sort of tech that we've sort of built, is hopefully going to learn from scratch. And so that's going to be really, really interesting. Will dictate to us, hopefully, sort of how operationally we should build things out, which then might mean from a product and service perspective, we have to do things a little bit differently.
Yes.
So yeah, going to be really interesting to see sort of how that transfers, but also going to be interesting to see from a customer proposition perspective if it transfers and how well it transfers to sort of a different market in France. So going to be interesting to see what that conversion rate's like of customers selecting us versus the standard delivery options, then what that retention rate's like, their sort of sensitivity to pricing, whether there's an average order value that we need to be looking at. Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. And as I sort of mentioned, our assumptions going into London and operating were not great. So we've decided to sort of take a pretty assumptionless approach into Paris and try to onboard a range of different merchants so that we sort of get a bit of a sample of different types of socio-demographic groups of customers and operational complexity and types of products that they're selling, so that we hopefully learn as quickly as possible as to what does work, what doesn't, and we can sort of improve quite quickly. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
And you've got some really good targets already in terms of increasing conversion at checkout by 15 to 25%, like as what happens now in the UK, as well as that 85% customer retention.
Yeah.
If you can do that in the French market, I think you're set for world domination afterwards.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how we get on. Yeah. I think as with anything, as you sort of scale, to sort of continue to sort of provide the sort of same customer experience that I was providing when it was me doing the delivery sort of at the start, and I still do some now, but to sort of continue to sort of ensure the same sort of service is one of the biggest challenges. And so yeah, I mean, that's something we're very cognizant of, and sort of trying to understand. I guess we'll see sort of after Paris, but what's the right rate at which we should grow this? If we grow too quickly, does that actually undervalue what we're able to provide because we're not able to keep the sort of the service level and the value proposition consistent? Or is it actually more sensible to diversify in terms of the products and services that we do offer, in terms of, as I said, we have a long list of different things that we can do, both on the merchant side of things and to customers? Or instead, does it make more sense for brands and retailers that we're working with, for them to say, we want to use you guys in our top sort of 5 or 10 cities globally that account for maybe sort of 30% of the revenue that we do around the world. And I mean, if you don't do that, then we're going to find somebody else to sort of do what you're doing. So yeah, it's really interesting for us, I guess, at the moment, to sort of try to make what we think the right decisions are going to be there, and I guess time will tell as to whether we do make those decisions in the correct way. But yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting sort of next 12, 24 months as we try to go through some of that.
Absolutely. Can't wait to see how the roadmap and the journey evolves for you and Quiver. Matt, any tips that you'd have for other founders, or let's say people in general during this period of, let's say, economic uncertainty? You were founded during the pandemic. You've been growing ever since. Are you worried about inflation? What sort of tips would you give people at this point in time?
It's tricky. I think it would be helpful if I was in a position where Quiver had been a massive success, we'd sold it, or we'd had a massive exit, and then I would sort of potentially feel qualified in some way to give some sort of advice. I think when the way that we're thinking about sort of inflation and potential sort of we're already seeing it, sort of economic headwinds around sort of consumption, that matters to us as a business, because if customers aren't transacting as much, then the number of deliveries that they're requiring decreases, and that means that sort of the I guess addressable market that we're sort of solving for decreases or diminishes too. So that's interesting and something that we're keeping an eye on, and it's very interesting then to also understand from a sort of a market perspective what happens to sort of different segments of it. From a sort of at the lower end of the market, customers typically tend to continue to shop there and buy things from it during recessions or times of sort of economic difficulty. And at the luxury end, people with money typically still manage to have money and continue to want to buy nice things. It's that mid-market that typically sort of falls away from what we've seen so far, but also from sort of data that we've looked at. And so that's then really interesting for us as we think about it from a B2B perspective as to which merchants do we prioritize onboarding over the next sort of 6, 12, 24 months, and how do we sort of get those segments right to sort of fit with I guess the broader sort of macro picture. But I guess from an advice perspective, for me, I think in terms of the journey of the career that I've been on so far, one of the things that I've realized, whether I'm working for other people or working for a business that I have some hand in sort of setting up, is that I'm going to work pretty hard regardless. And so working hard for yourself and for sort of a better potential economic outcome for oneself, but also having slightly more control around sort of the vision and the direction of the thing that you're working on, are sort of great benefits to sort of entrepreneurship and setting your company up yourself. And I when I look at sort of friends and colleagues that I've worked with in the past who do work within large companies or in have taken perhaps a slightly more traditional route, who work very long hours, who are compensated well and have that certainty around when they're next going to be paid, but perhaps don't have the control over sort of the destiny or the direction that they really want to go in.
Yes.
It's a trade-off, and I think more people should be sort of thinking, especially in times of uncertainty. And I think we saw this during the pandemic, and hopefully will again over the next 12, 24 months, that as there is uncertainty, perhaps this is the time to sort of to start something yourself, or to find friends with which to sort of work on interesting projects. And as I say, you're going to work hard probably regardless of whether it's for somebody else or for yourself, so why not work hard for yourself?
Yeah, that's an excellent tip, particularly because as we saw during the global financial recession, a lot of incredible companies came out of it. I think hard times breed success.
Right. It's I think it's going to be it's interesting, right? And it breeds a certain sort of level of resiliency, I think, within founders and early teams, where sort of capital perhaps is less readily available, and there are sort of economic sort of headwinds. That resilience really helps you to sort of build a more thoughtful, perhaps sort of culture internally that sort of perhaps provides a sort of more resilient foundation for a company to be built on over the next sort of 8 to 10 years. And we saw that in the last sort of financial crisis, and potentially we'll see that again in 10 years' time, sort of coming out of this.
Yes, indeed. Exciting times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Other than a very self-serving plug in that we're hiring. So if there are people that are, and my last bit of sort of advice really goes against it, but if you'd like to sort of take ownership and be part of an early-ish team going after what we think is a pretty large market and interesting opportunity that we think does need to be solved and will be solved at some point over the next sort of 10 or 15 years, and we're hopeful it'll be us that sort of contributes towards solving it, across sort of product and engineering, design, to operations, some really tricky but interesting operational problems to sales and business development and account management and customer success too, then please do get in touch, either via the website or by emailing me at matt@quiver.co.uk. And if you're a brand or merchant that wants to sort of elevate the customer proposition that you're providing to retailers, then we are sort of still onboarding a few retailers before peak period coming up in sort of November, Black Friday and Christmas. So if there's something we can do together, then similarly get in touch.
Fantastic. Alrighty. So look, I mean, we'll be sure to link everyone back to your profile, and hopefully you get a few job applications out of this or new merchants.
Thank you very much, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're up to.
No, anytime, Matt. Thanks for sharing your experience both at Quiver and before, and I'm sure it's going to prove very helpful for our listeners. So thank you so much.
Fingers crossed. Cheers, Lucas.